Welcome to the first episode of Stand on Guard with David Krayden. We've changed the name. It's the new beginning, and we hope you enjoy this independent production. We're going to be talking about a few things, but stay tuned. Maybe they're beginning to realize that Justin Trudeau is responsible for all this trouble. Yeah, welcome back. We've got a great show for you today, including an interview at the end here with Eva Chipiuk, the lead Freedom Convoy lawyer. And of course, that's been a story all week here again, although you wouldn't know it to read the mainstream media. There is a Judge Mosley is right now looking at the constitutionality, the legality of invoking the Emergencies Act last February 14th, which is something Prime Minister Justin Trudeau did in response to the Freedom Convoy protests in Ottawa. Now, a lot of us thought that was completely unnecessary, completely unjustified, and a complete overreach of government power. And that's what Judge Mosley is looking at this week. He's had 3 days of testimony from those affected by the Freedom Convoy and by the invocation of the Emergencies Act. And it's going to be interesting to see how he rules on this. But the story of the week, I think, whether you're in Canada or the United States, has got to be the formal arrest of former President Donald Trump, who had to go all the way from Mar-a-Lago, Florida to New York City to surrender himself to authorities, where he was arraigned and he was formally charged. 34 counts of what? 34 counts of what? Apparently it's, and they won't even reveal what the real felony is. This is all based on a misdemeanor of an alleged hush fund money. And the whole thing is so ridiculous, as if this doesn't happen every day, as if former presidents hadn't paid off people because they didn't want to be embarrassed by their testimony. But this really is a turning point, I think, in American politics, because it's not just optically very bad. It is catastrophic in terms of the effect on the justice system. The justice system has become completely politicized in the United States. And this is beyond dispute, beyond doubt, because I haven't heard yet a single credible legal authority proclaim that there was any justification in arresting and charging former President Donald Trump with these 34 counts of one count. And that's all it really amounts to. It's one thing, which happened 7 years ago. And so why are they going after Donald Trump? Because they're afraid he's going to win the nomination of the Republican Party and run for president again in 2024. And this is why this whole thing is going on. And of course, they're going to meet again, reconvene for the beginning of the trial, or at least reconvene to see what comes next in December. And this, of course, is outrageous. Just about the time that the Republican Party will be deciding who their next nominee for president is. So it clearly has nothing to do with justice. It has everything to do with politics. And it's quite chilling, because this is the sort of thing that was routinely done in totalitarian countries, where former political foes were punished by the judicial system. In extremis in those countries, they were sometimes executed or spent the rest of their life in a concentration camp or a gulag. But in this country, actually, there have been reports that Trump could, if convicted, Trump could spend over 100 years in jail, be sentenced to 100 years in jail. And this is absolutely ludicrous. But we are dealing with this kind of mentality, and it's really, really got to stop. So I want to move on to some idiocy in this country before we get to the interview. But the idiocy in this country is basically this: that we have the federal government, and in this case, the BC provincial government and the City of Vancouver municipal government, all funding something called a drag camp. And this sort of thing you would have imagined possible in another age, like maybe 10 years ago. But we have a drag camp from kids as young as 7 to 11, and then a teen drag camp for those, I believe, 13 to 17. And it's so outrageous that this sort of event even exists in the first place, that we would have children exposed to this sort of nonsense. And as most people would say, absolute filth. But this is being not just allowed and tolerated, it's being encouraged by the federal government and other levels of government. And just as these drag queen story hours are being encouraged and forced upon children, kids, and it's the sort of thing we would never have imagined. Why would we want to put together children and drag queens in the same room? I mean, can we not find people of great reputation, heroic Canadians, and in the case of the U.S., heroic Americans who were with the fire force, the local firefighters, police force, in the military? Maybe they earned a Medal of Valor while serving overseas, or by rescuing lives here in Canada or the United States. Why are these people not being presented to kids and to tell their stories and to read stories to them? Why are we allowing kids to share the same room with drag queens? It's absolutely crazy, unless there is something behind all of this. And I don't remember going on a field trip to a strip club when I was in elementary school. And that would have been absolutely outrageous. And why aren't they doing this as well today, you might ask? Because it's just as outrageous. But of course, it probably hasn't occurred to them yet. But the people who are coming up with this nonsense are devoted to an ideology, a transgender ideology. And they deny that there's two biological sexes. And they can deny that all they want, but they cannot deny the facts. They cannot deny reality. They cannot deny the scientific basis of my just saying that. And if people want to go down this transgender route, that is their decision as adults. It's not their decision as adults to impose that on children above the heads of their parents. And of course, the CBC is well on board with this, with its production of Drag Kids, which is about kids being introduced to drag queens. Now, where on earth would this even be considered a viable programming idea, let alone something that is on the air? But it is. This is how sick Canada has become. It's become a country devoted to this ideology. I had a wonderful conversation this week with Mr. Maxime Berner, an old friend of mine. He's the former Foreign Affairs Minister, a former industry minister under the government of Prime Minister Stephen Harper. He's currently the leader of the People's Party of Canada. And you know what? His party is the only one that has voiced any opposition to these drag camps and these drag queen story hours, and to the federal government's subsidization of these projects. Why are there nobody else? Why is there nobody else in the House of Commons, no other MP, no other political party leader willing to stand up and say, this is just dead wrong. This is just absolutely disgusting. We have to stop this. And we certainly should be not using taxpayer money to fund it. But I can't see another politician in the House of Commons willing to stand up and say that. And no other political party has taken a stand against this. This is completely outrageous. And this is the sort of thing we have to ask ourselves, what is going on in the minds of these people, if in fact their minds are functioning? But complete outrage. And the other outrage of the week is that there was very little media attention to a very important court case going on in Ottawa this week. And that was a judge assessing the validity, legality, constitutionality of Justin Trudeau invoking the the Emergencies Act last February 14th, 2022. He invoked the Emergencies Act to shut down, to clamp down, to snuff out the Freedom Convoy protests that were going on, largely at that point only in Ottawa. And they were completely peaceful. And we said at the time, this was just plain political overreach. It was the federal government silencing opponents it didn't like. And of course, I just spoke to Eva Chipiuk, who is one of the lead Freedom Convoy lawyer, although she always tells me she's just one of the people representing, but she's been so tremendous in terms of her the comments she's made, the feedback she's given me. that I really think she has been a leading force in articulating exactly why in the invocation of the Emergencies Act was a horrible mistake. It has put Canada on a road of authoritarian rule. And if Judge Mosley, who's looking at it this week, decides that there was nothing wrong with this, I fear that we're going to be giving any government extra power to shut down any protest it doesn't agree with. Because ultimately, this isn't just about the Freedom Convoy protests. It's about governments using the law to silence political protest, peaceful political protest. If it doesn't like what those people are saying, it can silence them. And that's contrary to good government and contrary to all democratic values. And this is something that has got to stop. And if it doesn't stop, we are in grave trouble as a nation. So I want that to be really clearly understood. And I hope we can, you'll enjoy the interview that's coming up after this with Eva Chipiuk. Yes, we're back again with my guest, Eva Chipiuk, one of the lawyers for the Freedom Convoy. And of course, that the constitutionality of the invocation of the Emergencies Act has been under scrutiny and challenge all week in an Ottawa court. So I just want to ask you, Eva, are you optimistic that this judge is going to rule in the favor of not invoking the Emergencies Act?
So as an individual, I tend to try to be optimistic. So I'm going to remain optimistic in this case as well. And I have to say, as a lawyer, I'm going to remain optimism as well, because the evidence just isn't there for the federal government to justify invoking the Emergencies Act. And I really hope that Justice Mosley in this case sees it as well. There was no evidence to show that there was a threat to national security, except for what could have been, maybe was, or in imaginary land. But there wasn't actually any physical concrete evidence, affidavits showing and swearing that there was an issue. And in fact, as we know from the Public Order Emergencies Inquiry, the evidence showed the opposite. There was a lack of serious violence. And CSIS, the day before the Emergencies Act was invoked, told the federal government, do not invoke the Emergencies Act. This is about government overreach, and the people here don't believe the system, that believe the system is broken. And if you invoke such a power like the Emergencies Act, it will cause more extreme views, and it will cause people to be more disillusioned with the government. So that's the evidence. The evidence, if CSIS thought there was a serious national security issue, they wouldn't be saying don't invoke it the day before. Like, that's evidence.
Yes, and the judge in this case, Judge Mosley, when I first heard this, I thought somebody was pulling my leg, but apparently he was a trucker before he became a lawyer and then a judge. Very unusual in my understanding. But do you think that's going to help him to sort this out in a way that's more positive than the Justice Rouleau was able to do?
I don't know. And actually, I saw a clip of Justice Rouleau a long time ago saying he wanted to be a trucker. So it's very interesting that these two judges had either wanted to be or were truckers. But, you know, whether or not they are, it's really, again, about the evidence and about the case. And the case just isn't there. And one thing I'd like to note about what has happened at the start of Monday's hearing is the government of Canada had the gall to suggest to the court that this action should be struck, that the court shouldn't even listen to the arguments of civil rights of Canadians being just dismissed at the whim of the government because it's too late, it's over now. No, that's not how it works, federal government of Canada. You work for Canadians, and Canadians need their day in court. And there's been a lot of these mootness arguments brought by the federal government, and I'm getting a little bit tired of it, because it's Canadians that are taxpayers that are paying for these federal government lawyers, and they're meant to be there to hear. If Canadians are bringing cases against the federal government, guess what? You're going to have to start listening to them. That's what the court system is for. It's not about propping up the government in power. It's about having a day in court and letting a judge hear the evidence.
Yeah, the judge seemed to be going against the government when it was trying to justify the freezing of bank accounts. From what I could see, he really wasn't buying this. Do you think that this remains one of the most terrifying aspects of the Emergencies Act, that the government can put its hand on all the money you own, except that which you may have under your mattress at home, but can just literally seize your assets because you support a project or politician or a priority, just repeat, that they don't necessarily agree with?
Yeah, well, it should be terrifying for the judge and Canadians and investors and potential people that want to come to Canada. That should be incredibly terrifying. What the federal government did was unconscionable. It's to take away people's ability to sustain themselves with purchasing food or shelter. Like you're suggesting, you're assuming that they were at home to grab the money under their mattress. What if they can't get a home because all of a sudden they don't have access to any finances? So the overreach that the government did was incredibly chilling. And the government needs to own up to what it did, because it is certainly very concerning, not only to Canadians, but to people outside of Canada, for sure.
I'm sure you worry about the politicization of the courts in this country, the justice system. And I don't necessarily, if you care to comment on what's happening to former President Donald Trump right now in the United States, I would love that. I understand if you wouldn't. However, are you concerned that, like what's happening in the United States, the justice system has become, or could become, so politicized that we end up going after political opponents? And this clearly is what Trudeau has done, but are we coming to a point where he could routinely use the justice system to attack political opponents?
Well, I'm going to turn it a little bit differently in that I've been quite disappointed with the amount of opposition that we've had in this country, because if the court system is turning political, it's because I believe that our elected officials aren't stepping up the way they should be stepping up. I kind of agree. None of these cases should be heard, and there shouldn't be political opponents like this. But if our elected officials were, a little bit pushing back more, but what I feel is they want to stay in their safe zone. They want to go where the polling is going, and they don't want to go outside of the box. And that is where, over this last year, I feel there's been quite a disconnect, that regular Canadians are doing the job that politicians should be doing, and that's not right. And in effect, courts are becoming politicized. So that's the effect of it, because we don't have as much. In the United States is a bit different. They are always have been more adversarial. In Canada, we're just not there yet. And politicians, I think, on all stripes, instead of having, serious and strong debates, we're having, don't be that mean to another MP. That is just silly talk, and that needs to be exposed and addressed. We need serious debates in the House of Commons. We need serious dialogue with our elected officials together with constituents, so we're not running to the court about these political issues.
If the judge does happen to rule against the government invoking the Emergencies Act, is this going to have any immediate benefits for those who were punished under the Emergencies Act, and B, will it have long-term benefits in terms of the government being less than willing to invoke this act in the future?
So in response to your first question, it likely will not have any effect on anybody affected by the Emergencies Act, except for those few people that filed a lawsuit. And those issues would be different. And that's not what, I don't believe that's why the case went to court. The reason was to have the court decide whether or not the government enacted what it did was legal or not, whether or not it was justified or not. And that's what the court needs to understand and decide on. Where I am a little pessimistic is, yes, if the judge decides, which I believe is correct, that the Emergencies Act was not justified, then what? That's the big question I think any justice and Justice Mosley in particular is going to have to wrap his head around. Okay, there was no evidence to invoke the Emergencies Act. The Prime Minister made a big mistake here. What am I supposed to do with that? And I do understand that's a big task he has, but for Canada, for the benefit of Canada, for moving forward and healing, we need to close that gap at some point. Whether Trudeau is removed via confidence vote, if that's what the justice decides that, it wasn't justified, or whether he's a little bit kinder in his words and then Trudeau is voted out via an election, fine. But we need to address that there were wrongs that occurred. And I empathize with Justice Mosley, because this is a big task he has ahead of him. And for that reason, I am a little bit pessimistic. What does he do in this situation? I don't know exactly how he's going to manage that.
So in the event that he does rule in the government's favor, does this not bode well for future protests of any sort against any government that might just disagree with what those people are saying?
Excuse me. Yeah, 100%. That will be quite a chilling effect. And I anticipate that the applicants would then look to take it to the Court of Appeal and look to overturn that decision. But it certainly would have a chilling effect on protests. And how far are we going to go? Like, this is really, in my view, very serious what the government did. And I just can't see how it would be justified, how it is being suggested to be justified by the government.
Are you getting any feedback during this week from your friends in the Freedom Convoy movement? Are they expressing any measure of hope or optimism? Like you?
Yeah, well, I think like everyone's individual, and some have faith and hope for a good outcome and some don't. The one thing though that I am getting a lot of feedback is, thank you for informing me. It seems that not too many people are talking about this. And when the Freedom Convoy was in Ottawa, it was on the daily news, nightly news, about how terrible these people are. So where are the news outlets right now? Reporting on the evidence in court, reporting on this huge issue that for 3 weeks they dedicated most of their time to. Nobody's talking about it right now. And that's disconcerting to me, that it's kind of being brushed aside by the mainstream media. Yeah,
I have to agree. Looking at the media response this week, it's been very disappointing that there has been virtually nobody talking about it. It was a couple of articles announcing it was going to happen, but very few people on scene this week doing daily reports, and very, very few people yesterday announcing it was even over. So I think that's a very bad thing for our democracy, and I think it's a very, very bad thing for our judicial system, because this is something that's going to affect everybody. And if people think this is just about the Freedom Convoy, I think that's a terrible mistake, because this is about our freedom in this country to protest policies we disagree with in a peaceful way, and to not be smeared as racist, misogynist, homophobes, and all the rest just for voicing an opinion. It has nothing to do with those other things. I'm sure you'd agree.
Completely agree. Yeah, this is about the rights and freedoms in a supposedly sophisticated and inclusive Canada.
Yes. Joining me today was Ms. Eva Chipiuk of the Freedom Convoy lawyer. And I want to thank you so much for being with us today, Eva. It's been, as usual, an edifying conversation, as it always is. And I hope we can see justice done on this.
I agree. Thanks for having me, and let's keep hoping.
Just wanted to introduce my guest today, a longtime friend and political associate from the Hill in the old days of the Harper government, Mr. Maxime Berner, the Honorable Maxime Berner, who was a former industry and foreign affairs minister in the government of Stephen Harper, and is now the leader of the People's Party of Canada. And as we were just discussing, and I'll get into the guts of our conversation shortly, but I just wanted to let our guests know that you are continuing to work to build the People's Party of Canada right now.
Yes, absolutely. As you know, I'm the leader of the People's Party of Canada. We started that party 5 years ago with 0%. Our first election in 2019, 1.6% of the vote. And the last election in 2021, 5% of the vote. And I'm traveling across the country, meeting our people. And actually, we are in the process right now to find some candidates. We have up to now 100 candidates approved and ready to fight if there's an election. And our goal is to have another maybe 150 more candidates before the end of this year. So like that, when the election will come, we will be ready and we'll have a candidate in every riding, and every Canadian will be able to vote in line with their values. So yes, we are building the party, and that's very encouraging.
Will you be running again in your old seat in Quebec?
No, I won't. No, I won't. For the general election, I'm looking right now at two ridings, one in northern Ontario, in Timmins, Ontario, the other one in southern Alberta, southern Manitoba, Portage, Lisgar. And actually, I may run before the general election because we will have a by-election in 5 ridings across the country because we didn't have a general election. And actually, the riding of Portage Lisgard will be in a by-election before the end of October. And I may run there, and we'll see. I still have to meet some people over there. And that would be for me an opportunity maybe to be back in Parliament before the general election. So I'm looking at that, and I'll be able to decide early July.
Well, we certainly need you back in the House, but I think you're doing more work for Canadians right now than, say, Jagmeet Singh of the NDP is doing, coordinating Justin Trudeau's government. So I do think you're doing a lot of work, and I, as much as we want you back in the House, because I believe you keep the Conservative Party of Canada more honest than it would be. I think you keep them from drifting too far to the left, which they have a tendency to do, even with its current leader, who I think is an improvement over the last. But I don't trust the Conservative Party of Canada any more than you do, to stay honest. So I look forward to seeing you back in the House in that capacity. But talking about the work you're doing, I've been reading the material you've submitted to Twitter on what is going on in this country with drag queen story times. But I was especially outraged, as I saw you were, with this drag summer camp that's being offered in British Columbia. What on earth is this about?
Yeah, actually, we must understand that the drag queen story hour is a political ideology, and we must understand that. It may be fun and comic to see people dressed, men dressed like a girl, and so it can be maybe family friend. They try to sell it like family friend, but the real goal, if you look at it, the real goal, it's a political ideology that is going against the two sexes, and they try to sexualize young children, and that's why me and the People's Party of Canada is against that to children. It must be something for adults. But when they are doing that, they try to put some confusion in child's mind, saying that maybe the reality that we know, that there's only two sexes, male and female, may not be the reality. That may be different, and so when you are young kids, you try to look at the behavior of your parents and you want to imitate that. And so when they're doing their performance in front of kids, it is the sexualization of kids, and it is telling them that, you know, you may not be a young boy, you may be a young girl, and vice versa. So I understand why some parents are very upset with that, and they are. That's you know, the drag queens and their radical trans activists are promoting their ideology to kids, and we must not tolerate that. It's disgusting, and all that must end. And that's why, you know, I tweeted about that, and we are against that. But it is not politically correct to speak against the drag queen story hour. We are the only national political party that is speaking against that, because it's against our Western civilizations. It's against our education. It's against also, you know, biology and nature and science, that there's only two sexes, and a girl won't be able to be a boy, you know, and a boy won't be able to be a girl. That's the reality. So they are promoting their ideology with kids. And actually, what is worst is that the federal government, provincial government in BC, and also CBC are doing that promotion also. You know, we must end all that, and as soon as possible. You know, for me, that's all about, you know, gender dysphoria. If you think that you're in the wrong body, and you cannot solve that with hormones or things like that, and they are, some of them are mutilating their body by trying to transition to another sex. It won't happen, and that's why, you know, all that, the promotion of that kind of behavior with kids, it's inappropriate, at least.
Well, and these are at this drag camp, this summer camp, which is, it almost looks like a parody. It's so absurd and so ridiculous, but this is true. And they're asking 7-year-olds to come to the camp, and they say that we'll supply the makeup. It's just, to me, I find this just beyond the pale.
Absolutely. And, you know, the federal government gave the last 2 years to that organization about $280,000 to promote the gender dysphoria. And so for me, I don't understand why you don't have more politicians in Canada at the provincial or federal level that are saying, you know, enough is enough. I know that the drag queen story hour in the US, you have more and more opponent against that for the reason that I said. But here in Canada, you know, if you speak against that, you'll be seen as anti-trans. I'm not anti-trans. You can do what you want with your body at 18 years old. Mm-hmm. But we must not promote that kind of behavior to children. It is the sexualization of children, and we are creating a kind of a confusion, sexual confusion among them when we are bringing kids to camps like that, or to drag queen story hour.
And it amazes me that you say there is no other opposition to this. Where is the Conservative Party of Canada? Where's Pierre Poilievre? Is he afraid to go after any social issues at all?
Absolutely. You know, Pierre Poilievre, people must understand that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party of Canada and the NDP and the Bloc Québécois and the Liberals and the Green, everybody in the House voted in favor of Bill C-4. And they were so happy that they did that. That's the bill that is for the, how do you call that? Conversion therapy. And
oh, yeah, yes.
So that's and Pierre Poilievre voted for that. So what that means is, if you are a parent and your kids has gender dysphoria, you cannot give to your kids and ask your kid to go to see a health professional for your kids to be able to accept his or her body. It's criminal. That's the bill C4. But the opposite is not criminal. So if your kid is a boy and your boy is saying, your little boy is saying, oh, I may be a girl today, and the teacher or one of the parents is saying, oh, it's okay, that kids will have hormones, and they will have a therapy to transition to another sex. So, but the opposite, to try to, have that discussion with children about gender and trying to have them to accept their sex, it is illegal and criminal. But Polyev and the conservative and everybody voted in favor of that bill. So that's why they're not speaking against that. They are for it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have misunderstood that bill as only pertaining to conversion treatment related to homosexuality. But of course, it's much broader than that, as you just pointed out. And I think that needs to be spelled out to Canadians, that this was a dark day with the passage of this bill. And it applies to a broad range of sexuality. So
yeah, you just have to read the bill. It's clear. It's a very, if you can go on do your research, go on the internet, bill C4, you'll see it. It's only 3 pages. Everything is there, and you're going to be able to acknowledge yourself of what I said. It's the reality that it is in the bill.
CBC claims it's only received a few angry letters or opposing remarks about its show Drag Kids. Do you think that's true? Or do you think there's more people out there upset about this?
First, can we trust the CBC? That's the question. CBC is a woke organization, and they are all in that, that drag queen story time. That's their pet projects. So if they received a lot of calls against that, they won't tell us that. So, but there's more and more protest in Canada. So I believe that more and more people understand what is happening there.
Yeah, you also mentioned the fact these drag story hours or story hours. How many other worthy people could be put there to talk to children? You say firefighters, police officers, military personnel, heroes who have won medals, but yet we're subjecting kids as young as 7 or 8 to cross-dressers, to drag queens, and yet we wouldn't take kids to a strip club, and yet so we seem to think this is almost normal now. But why aren't we reaching out to those people? Well, we used to reach out to true Canadian heroes and let them share their stories with children.
You have a point. Absolutely. We want children to be able to imitate, their heroes and their parents. And so let's find real heroes. It's not because, you have a person that will dance in front of you in a costume in the other sex, that is something that we must promote. If a kid wants to put a costume, and I had 2 daughters, and they did it when they were younger in their house and playing with costumes, it's okay. But it's a sexualization. When you have a show from a drag queen, it is sexual. It is the reality. They're doing that in bars, and but it's not a place for kids or for family. What I don't like is they are promoting that like a family friend event, and they are saying, it's to promote reading, promote the diversity and all that. But no, it's not about that. If you want to promote your kids to read and you want to promote reading, you can do that at another place than at a show like that.
Well, we've got so many issues in this country, and Pierre Poilievre just wants to talk about the carbon tax and very little else. But we have so many looming issues in this country. I mean, the farmers are facing increasing hardship with not being able to get fertilizer, which could lead to a potential famine, which could lead to us even not being able to feed our own people. We have a prime minister who is completely obsessed with something called diversity, and he can't even define that for us because it can mean just about anything. And we have people unwilling to say that the very character of this country is being gutted by allowing this explosion of drag queen phenomena. And it's almost like we're experiencing a decline in Canada, like the Roman Empire once did. Do you think we can still save this country?
That's why I'm in politics. That's why we created the People's Party of Canada. And my answer is yes. But the other part of your question is when. And I don't know when, but I believe that the common sense will prevail. And the more we speak about that, the more people will understand about that issue or other issues. And that's what we are doing. That's why I like to say that we at the PPC, we are doing politics differently, because, you know, we are speaking about things that may not be popular today or politically correct today, but, you know, we have strong conviction, and we believe the more we speak about our conviction based on the Western civilization values, individual freedom, personal responsibility, respect, and fairness, the more we speak about our policies, the more support we will have. And actually, if you look at the past, we started the party at 0%, 1.6, and now 5%. And I believe at the next election, we will grow. So, but that's the opposite of the conservative and the mainstream establishment political parties. They are doing politics just based on survey and polling and what people think today. And they will repeat that. So Poilievre is not a leader. Is a follower, is following the public opinion. And, you know, we need a leader in Canada that will lead with strong ideas and strong values. And I believe that our time will come, but I don't know when. But I can tell you that we have great people across the country that are ready to fight when we'll have an election. And we can make a big surprise at the next election. So I'm optimistic that we will win that battle, or that common sense revolution. We need to be out there and to speak about what we believe openly with passion and conviction, and we'll have more support.
So how do you respond to those conservatives who say, as long as you're still in the race, as long as you're still seeking to have MPs elected, you're just dividing the small c conservative libertarian vote and helping Trudeau? How do you respond to people like that?
Yeah, that's the argument about splitting the vote. But, you know, we don't split the conservative vote because the conservatives are not conservative right now. Look at our platform. Poilievre won't speak about mass immigration. He actually agrees with that. You know, 500,000 people that will come here in 2025. And we had last year 1 million people if you had the non-resident and the foreign students. So he won't speak about that. He won't speak about the drag queen story hour. He won't. He won't speak about balancing the budget as soon as possible. For him, we must cap the budget. So for him, it's okay to have a big fat government that will tell you what to do or what not to do. You know, I can go on with the equalization formula that is unfair, and we must be less generous. The climate change, you know, the conservative are okay with the Paris Accord. We will withdraw from the Paris Accord. I understand that Poilievre won't impose a carbon tax, but he will impose more regulation and on businesses to achieve the Paris Accord goals. So that would be costly for Canadians. So what I'm telling you is read our platform. It's not the platform, the conservative platform from the Conservative Party of Canada, and that's why we don't split any vote. Polyev, if you listen to him pretty carefully, and the time every time it's going a little bit more to the left. Polyev, his goal is to split the liberal vote, and he will do that, and he's doing that. Because for him to win the election, he will need to have more support in the big GDA near Toronto in Ontario. There's more seats over there than in all Alberta together. And he will need to have support in Vancouver. So he will need to have support from these big liberals cities. And so that's why he's going to the left. So he is splitting the liberal vote, and we don't split any vote because we are very different than the Conservative Party of Canada.
Well, it's hard to disagree with that, because you once told me that even as a libertarian, as a small c conservative, you were not afraid to talk about social issues, which of course the Conservative Party of Canada has always been afraid to talk about social issues. So I applaud you for doing this. It needs to be done. You're the only one doing it out there with any credibility as a politician. And I thank you for that, because I know a lot of Canadians have been adversely affected by this incredible explosion in this drag queen phenomenon, and it's our children that we're trying to save from this. And I think you're doing that. So I thank you for your time today, Maxime. It's always a pleasure, and I hope we see you back in the House again. And all the best in that riding.
Thank you, David. I'm very pleased that we had time to have that discussion together. And yes, if I decide to run in that by-election, I'll do everything to be back. But also at the same time, if I'm not back, I have more time to travel across the country and to speak about real common sense reforms. But our time will come. I hope it will be as soon as possible. So thank you for everything, David, and let's stay in touch.
Yes, by all means, we will. And joining me today, I want to thank my guest, Mr. Maxime Berner, leader of the People's Party of Canada and former Foreign Affairs Minister under the government of Stephen Harper. Thank you again, Maxime.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
I hope you're enjoying this channel as much as I enjoy putting the material on here. This is not just about politics. I sing some of my favorite songs from the Great American Songbook. And you can also watch my latest show where we do some of the news you're not going to hear anywhere else. But please like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. If you want to be part of this station, please be a subscriber. We want you.